"A janitor does not walk into my bank with a check like this," Bradley Whitman said, and the whole lobby seemed to stop breathing. The check lay between his manicured fingers, white paper under bright fluorescent light, its edges trembling slightly from the air vent above the teller counter. Across from him stood Marcus Bennett in a gray maintenance uniform, one hand still resting on the handle of his cleaning cart, the other curled quietly at his side. The morning rush at Caldwell National Bank had been moving in its usual polished rhythm until that sentence cut through it. A woman in pearl earrings paused with her deposit slip halfway folded. A young man near the ATM lowered his phone. Behind the counter, Lily Parker, the newest teller, looked from the check to Marcus with a fear she tried hard to hide. Bradley smiled as if he had already solved a crime no one else was smart enough to notice. He was 38, tall, crisp, and expensive in the way some men wore authority before they earned it. His navy suit had no wrinkles. His silver tie clip caught the light. His voice carried across marble floors that Marcus himself had buffed before sunrise. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not step closer. He only looked at the check and said, "I asked you to verify it, Mr. Whitman, not judge it." That made a few heads turn even sharper. Bradley's smile thinned. "You know what verification is for, Marcus? It is for real clients with real accounts and real explanations." He tapped the paper with one finger. "This is a six-figure cashier's check, made payable to you, from a private estate account. And you expect me to believe that?" Marcus held Bradley's stare, calm but tired, the kind of tired that lives deeper than sleep. His hands were rough from years of bleach, mop water, winter salt, and metal trash bins dragged through alley doors before most people had coffee. But there was nothing small in the way he stood. Not proud in a loud way, just rooted, like a man who had survived too many rooms that wanted him invisible. "A check does not become false because of the hand holding it," Marcus said. The words landed softly, but they landed. Lily's eyes flickered with something like respect. Bradley noticed. His jaw tightened. He glanced around the lobby, saw the waiting customers, the security guard near the glass entrance, the brass plaque that read "Founded by Arthur Caldwell, 1968, and decided this was a performance he needed to win. "I know exactly what this is," he said. "A stunt." Then, before Lily could reach out, before Marcus could speak again, Bradley folded the check once, sharply, and tore it down the middle. The sound was small, almost delicate, but in that lobby it felt louder than thunder. Two pieces of paper drifted onto the counter, one holding the amount, the other holding half a signature. Marcus looked down at them. His face did not break, but something behind his eyes went very still. Marcus Bennett had been inside Caldwell National Bank before the first customer every weekday for 17 years, long before Bradley Whitman learned which elevator opened to the manager's office. He arrived at 4:45 in the morning, when downtown Chicago still smelled like cold concrete, bus exhaust, and coffee from the 24-hour diner across LaSalle Street. He unlocked the service entrance with the same brass key he had carried through 3 branch renovations, 2 recessions, and 1 winter so hard the salt stains never fully left the front steps. Most mornings, Marcus moved through the building like a shadow with a schedule. He emptied the trash bins beneath polished desks. He wiped fingerprints from glass doors that would later reflect expensive coats and confident faces. He buffed the marble lobby until the floor looked deep enough to hold light. People said good morning to him sometimes, but usually to the uniform, not to the man inside it. They knew the squeak of his cart better than the sound of his voice. Marcus never complained. He believed work had dignity even when people failed to see it. His late wife, Ruth, used to say that the world could take a man's title, but not the way he carried himself. So he carried himself carefully, shoulders straight, shoes clean, words measured. Even when customers stepped around his wet floor signs as if they were stepping around him. Even when young bankers left coffee cups beside trash cans instead of inside them. Even when Bradley, on his first week as branch manager, told him to use the back hallway during business hours because certain clients did not need to see maintenance traffic near private banking. Marcus remembered that moment clearly. Bradley had said it with a pleasant smile, the kind that tried to make disrespect sound like policy. Marcus had simply nodded and kept working, not because he was weak, but because he had learned the cost of giving every insult a place to live inside him. That morning had been different. The check had come in a cream envelope, delivered 3 weeks after Arthur Caldwell's funeral, made the front page of the business section. Marcus had opened it at his kitchen table in Bronzeville, under a yellow lamp that hummed softly above a stack of unpaid utility bills. For several minutes, he had not moved. The amount on the check looked unreal, but the letter beside it felt painfully real. The handwriting was old-fashioned, slanted, steady, and familiar. Arthur Caldwell had written Marcus's full name as if it belonged in a place of honor. Marcus had read the letter twice, then folded it back into the envelope with hands that would not stop shaking. He did not tell his neighbors. He did not call anyone. He put on his gray uniform, rode the number 3 bus north, and reported for his shift. Only after the lobby opened did he step to Lily Parker's window and ask quietly to make a deposit. Now, with the torn check resting on the counter between him and Bradley, all those silent years seemed to gather in the air. Marcus bent slowly and picked up the half with Arthur's signature. The paper felt thin between his fingers, almost weightless, yet heavy enough to change the temperature of the room. Bradley Whitman had built his career on rooms like this one. Rooms where glass walls made power visible and polished floors turned every step into a statement. 6 months earlier, he had arrived at Caldwell National Bank with a framed business degree, a spotless record in sales, and a smile that made senior executives believe he understood discipline. He had come from a suburb north of the city, where lawns were trimmed by hired crews and success was measured by how far one could stay from discomfort. His father had been a loan officer who taught him early that people revealed their value by the doors they were allowed to enter. Bradley never forgot that lesson. He only polished it until it sounded professional. To wealthy clients, he was warm. To attorneys and investors, he was patient. To elderly account holders with large balances, he lowered his voice and called them sir or ma'am as if respect were a premium service. But to couriers, guards, cleaners, and anyone whose name appeared on a timesheet instead of a portfolio, Bradley offered a different version of himself. Shorter words, colder eyes, instructions instead of greetings. He did not call it prejudice. He called it standards. From his corner office overlooking the lobby, he watched the branch the way some men watched a kingdom. The private banking lounge had to smell faintly of leather and lemon polish. The pens at the counter had to face the same direction. The brass plaque near the entrance had to shine clearly enough for clients to read Arthur Caldwell's name before they spoke to a teller. Bradley liked that plaque, not because he admired Arthur, whom he had met only twice, but because old names gave new men cover. They made ambition look inherited. That morning, before Marcus stepped to the teller window, Bradley had been preparing for Eleanor Caldwell's regional inspection. Her visit was not supposed to happen until afternoon, but he wanted every surface perfect, every employee alert, every customer handled quickly. A complaint on inspection day could follow a manager like a stain. So when Lily Parker pressed the silent assistance button beneath her counter, Bradley came out already annoyed. He expected a confused customer, a missing identification card, maybe a routine hold on a large deposit. Then he saw Marcus Bennett standing there in his maintenance uniform with a cashier's check that belonged, in Bradley's mind, to another kind of person. The judgment formed before the facts did. It moved through him quickly, cleanly, almost comfortably. He saw the gray shirt, the work boots, the worn cuffs, the cleaning cart still parked near the velvet rope. He saw the amount on the paper. He saw Lily's uncertainty. And he decided the story without reading the whole document. Now, after the tear, the silence in the lobby had changed shape. It was no longer the respectful silence Bradley expected when a manager took control. It was thinner, sharper, full of eyes. He could feel customers studying him. He could feel Lily standing too still behind the counter. He could feel Marcus holding that torn signature as if it were not evidence of fraud, but evidence against Bradley himself. For the first time that morning, Bradley wondered whether he had made a scene he could not manage. Marcus did not move toward the door when Bradley expected him to. He did not lower his eyes, did not apologize for standing at the counter, did not give the room the easy ending Bradley had designed for it. Instead, he placed the torn half with Arthur Caldwell's signature flat on the marble counter and smoothed it gently with 2 fingers, as if even damaged paper deserved care. "Miss Parker," Marcus said, his voice low but clear enough for the first row of customers to hear. "Would you please log the check number and call the estate verification line printed on the back?" Lily's breath caught. She looked at Bradley first, because fear had trained her to look upward before doing what was right. Bradley turned his head slowly. "Lily, you will do no such thing." Marcus looked at her, not pleading, not commanding, just human. "The bank has a process," he said. "I am asking for the process." Something in that sentence shifted the air. It was not a demand for special treatment. It was worse for Bradley. It was a demand for equal treatment, spoken calmly in front of witnesses. Lily glanced down at the torn check, then at the thin black line of magnetic numbers still visible along the bottom edge. Her hands hovered above the keyboard. "Mr. Whitman," she said carefully, "we are supposed to document any damaged financial instrument before rejecting it, especially if it is a cashier's check." Bradley's eyes sharpened. "Are you explaining policy to me?" Lily swallowed. "No, sir. I am confirming procedure." A murmur passed through the lobby, soft as a draft under a closed door. Near the waiting area, an older man with a cane leaned forward. A young mother holding a toddler tightened her grip on a stroller handle. The security guard, Daniel Price, shifted near the entrance but did not step closer. He had known Marcus for 8 years. Marcus was the man who brought him black coffee on overnight snow days and remembered his daughter's graduation date. Nothing about him looked dangerous. Everything about the moment looked wrong. Bradley sensed the room slipping away from him, and men like Bradley hated nothing more than losing control quietly. He reached for the torn paper, but Marcus placed his palm over it first. Not forceful. Final. "You have already torn it once," Marcus said. "You do not need to touch it again." Bradley let out a small laugh that had no humor in it. "Marcus, you are forgetting where you are." Marcus looked around the lobby, at the high windows, the polished counters, the plaque on the wall, the floor he had cleaned before dawn. "No," he said. "I know exactly where I am. I am in a bank where I have worked for 17 years, asking one employee to verify one check." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a cream envelope, edges softened from being held too tightly. Bradley's expression flickered. Marcus laid the envelope beside the torn check. On the front, written in dark blue ink, were 3 words, "For Marcus Bennett." The handwriting was old, elegant, unmistakably deliberate. Lily saw it and went still. "There is a letter with it," Marcus said. "And there is a phone number for the Caldwell estate attorney." Bradley stared at the envelope as if it had spoken. For the first time, his certainty did not look like power. It looked like a door beginning to open behind him. Bradley stared at the envelope long enough for the silence to begin working against him. The words on the front were simple, only a name, but they carried a patience he could not intimidate. He looked from the handwriting to Marcus, then to Lily, whose fingers still hovered near the keyboard. "Step away from the terminal," Bradley said. Lily froze. "Mr. Whitman, I only need to enter the check number to create a record." "I said step away." His voice stayed controlled, but the edges had hardened. It was the sound of a man trying to turn panic into policy. Lily slowly pulled her hands back, her cheeks pale under the lobby lights. Marcus watched her with quiet understanding. He knew what it cost a young employee to stand even halfway upright in a room ruled by someone else's signature. Bradley straightened his suit jacket and turned toward Daniel Price at the entrance. "Security, escort Mr. Bennett away from the teller line." Daniel did not move at first. His hand rested near his radio, but his eyes stayed on Marcus. "Is there a problem, sir?" Bradley's smile returned, thinner than before. "The problem is that an employee has brought a suspicious financial instrument into the branch, disrupted service, and refused management instruction." A few customers shifted uneasily. Suspicious, disrupted, refused. The words sounded official, but beneath them was the same old language Marcus had heard in different forms his whole life. Too much presence, too much confidence, too much dignity for the uniform he wore. Marcus placed the cream envelope closer to Lily's window, careful and slow. "I am not refusing anything," he said. "I am asking you to follow the bank's written policy." Bradley stepped closer to the counter, lowering his voice, but not enough. "You clean this building, Marcus. You do not interpret policy here." The sentence landed cold. Not loud, not dramatic, just cleanly cruel. The way polished things can be cruel when they are made to reflect only certain faces. The woman with pearl earrings looked down at her shoes. The older man with the cane closed his hand around the handle until his knuckles whitened. Lily blinked fast, fighting the wet shine in her eyes. Marcus did not flinch. He had been called less with more venom. He had been watched in stores, followed in elevators, corrected by people who knew less than he did, and thanked only when the trash disappeared without reminding anyone who carried it away. Still, this moment hurt differently because it happened in a place he had protected. With quiet hands for 17 years, Bradley pointed toward the side hallway. "You can leave now, or I will call the police and report attempted fraud." Daniel finally stepped forward, but he stopped beside Marcus instead of behind him. "Mr. Bennett," he said softly, "are you all right?" Bradley's eyes flashed. "That is not what I asked you to do." Marcus looked at Daniel, then back at Bradley. "I am all right." But his thumb pressed gently over Arthur Caldwell's torn signature, as if holding down the last unbroken piece of a promise. The lobby doors opened then, letting in a sharp ribbon of March air and the faint sound of traffic from LaSalle Street. Heels clicked once against the marble. Then again, the sound moved through the lobby with a rhythm everyone recognized before they knew why. Bradley turned, irritation already forming on his face, and saw Eleanor Caldwell walking in beneath the brass plaque bearing her father's name. Eleanor Caldwell did not ask why the lobby was silent. She simply stepped inside and let the silence answer for itself. Her charcoal coat moved softly around her knees, still carrying the cold March air from outside, and a thin line of rainwater glimmered along the edge of her umbrella. She had planned to arrive quietly before the official inspection, the way her father used to do when he wanted to see the truth of a place before people had time to polish it. Now the truth stood in front of her under bright lobby lights. A teller with frightened eyes. A security guard frozen between duty and conscience. A branch manager with his shoulders too stiff. And Marcus Bennett, the man who had cleaned her father's bank longer than most executives had worked in finance, standing at the counter with torn paper beneath his hand. Eleanor's eyes moved slowly over the scene. She noticed the cleaning cart parked near the velvet rope, the mop bucket half filled with cloudy water, the wet floor sign still standing exactly where Marcus had left it. She noticed the customers pretending not to stare. She noticed Lily Parker's fingers curled around the edge of the counter, as though the counter were the only solid thing left in the room. Bradley recovered. First, because men like Bradley often mistook speed for control. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, stepping away from Marcus with a practiced smile. "I apologize for the disturbance. We had a minor issue with an employee attempting an improper transaction, but I have the matter under control." Eleanor did not look at him right away. Her gaze remained on Marcus. "Mr. Bennett," she said quietly. Marcus lifted his eyes. For the first time that morning, someone in authority used his name without making it smaller. "Mrs. Caldwell," he answered. His voice was steady, but the lobby seemed to hear the weight beneath it. Eleanor took one step closer. "Are you hurt?" The question was simple, almost too simple, and it unsettled Bradley more than an accusation would have. Marcus looked down at the torn check, then at the cream envelope beside it. "No, ma'am," he said. "Only disappointed." The words floated into the room and stayed there. Not angry, not dramatic. Worse than both. Honest. Eleanor's face changed almost imperceptibly. Her father had trusted quiet people. He used to say loud men sold certainty, but quiet people carried history. She remembered him saying that in this very lobby, years ago, while Marcus polished the brass plaque after closing time. At the time, she had barely noticed Marcus. Now she saw him clearly. The silver in his beard, the tired dignity in his posture, the way his thumb protected a torn piece of paper like it was something living. Bradley cleared his throat. "Mrs. Caldwell, I strongly recommend we move this conversation out of the public area." Eleanor finally turned to him. In a moment, 2 words, soft as paper, but Bradley stopped speaking. She approached the counter, and the smell of lemon polish rose faintly from the marble beneath her hand. Marcus stepped back just enough to give her space. The torn check lay open now, 2 halves separated by a thin white scar. Eleanor saw the amount first, then the estate account, then the partial signature at the bottom, dark blue ink, slanted to the right, the final letter cut by the tear. Her breath caught so softly that only Lily heard it. The color began to drain from Eleanor Caldwell's face. Eleanor stared at the torn signature as if the lobby had vanished around her. The blue ink was incomplete, broken by Bradley's tear, but she knew the curve of the A, the careful pressure in the C, the slight lift at the end of the final stroke. She had seen that signature on birthday cards, trust documents, handwritten notes left on her desk, and the last letter her father had written from his hospital room. Arthur Caldwell had signed thousands of papers in his life, but never carelessly. Every signature meant his name was standing behind someone. Eleanor reached for the cream envelope, but paused before touching it. "May I?" she asked Marcus. The question made the room feel even smaller. Bradley blinked as though he had misheard. Marcus nodded once. Eleanor opened the envelope with both hands. Inside was a folded letter on thick stationery marked with the Caldwell family seal, not the bank logo, not a department stamp, but the private seal Arthur used only for personal matters. Her fingers trembled before she unfolded it. Bradley's expression shifted from irritation to uncertainty. Lily leaned forward without realizing it. Daniel lowered his eyes, giving the moment room. Eleanor read silently at first. The lobby heard only the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant traffic sliding along LaSalle Street outside. Then her mouth parted slightly. She looked at Marcus, then back at the letter. "This is my father's handwriting," she said. Bradley gave a short, nervous laugh. "Mrs. Caldwell, with respect, forged letters can look convincing." Eleanor did not turn toward him. "Do not speak." The words were calm, but they cut every excuse out of the air. Bradley closed his mouth. Eleanor continued reading, and with every line, the color left her face a little more. The letter was dated 8 days before Arthur Caldwell passed. It named Marcus Bennett directly. It referenced South Chicago, December of 1998, a 3-story apartment building on East 75th Street, a winter fundraiser, a gas leak, smoke, panic, and one man in a gray work coat who guided Arthur Caldwell through a back stairwell when the main exit had been blocked. Marcus lowered his gaze as the old memory returned, not as glory, but as heat, noise, and the weight of another man leaning on his shoulder in the dark. He had never told the story because he had not lived it for applause. He had lived it because someone needed help. Eleanor read the final lines aloud, her voice thinner now. "Marcus Bennett did not ask who I was before saving my life. He did not wait for recognition. He disappeared before I could thank him. If this reaches him after I am gone, make sure my promise does not disappear with me." The lobby went utterly still. Bradley looked at the torn check on the counter as if it had become something radioactive. Eleanor reached into the envelope again and pulled out a small photocopied photograph, old and grainy, from a newspaper clipping never published on the front page. It showed a younger Marcus in a dark winter coat, standing half-turned near an ambulance, his face caught in the edge of the frame, while Arthur Caldwell sat wrapped in a blanket behind him. Eleanor placed the photo beside the torn check. Her eyes lifted to Marcus with a pain that looked almost like shame. "My father looked for you for years," she whispered. Marcus swallowed once. "I was not trying to be found, ma'am." Eleanor looked at the signature again, then at Bradley. And today he finally was. Eleanor did not raise her voice when she ended Bradley Whitman's career in that lobby. She did not need to. The authority in her face was quiet, and that made it heavier. She folded her father's letter along its original crease, placed it back inside the envelope, and turned to Lily Parker. "Please open an incident record and preserve every camera angle from the moment Mr. Bennett entered the teller line." Lily nodded quickly, relief and fear moving across her face at the same time. Bradley stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking once against the marble. "Mrs. Caldwell, I made a judgment call based on risk. Any manager in my position would have questioned it." Eleanor looked at him for a long second. "Questioned it, yes. Torn it, no. Humiliated him, no. Threatened him with accusations before verification, no." Bradley's mouth opened, then closed. The words he had used so easily before seemed to have abandoned him. Eleanor turned to Daniel. "Mr. Price, please ask Assistant Manager Howard to come to the floor." Daniel gave a small nod and spoke quietly into his radio. No one in the lobby moved. Even the toddler by the waiting chairs had gone still, cheek resting against his mother's coat. Eleanor faced Bradley again. "You are relieved of branch authority effective immediately, pending formal review." The sentence landed without drama, but Bradley's face changed as if the air had been taken out of the room. "You cannot be serious," he whispered. Eleanor's eyes hardened. "You did not protect this bank. You disgraced it." Marcus lowered his gaze, not from satisfaction, but from the old discomfort of seeing a man stripped in public, even a man who had tried to strip him of dignity. Bradley looked toward the customers, toward Lily, toward Daniel, searching for the old arrangement of power and finding none of it where he had left it. Assistant Manager Howard, a careful man in his 50s with reading glasses hanging from a cord, hurried out from the back office. Eleanor gave him clear instructions: secure the torn check, contact the Caldwell estate attorney, document the damage, and begin replacement procedures through the issuing estate account. Then she turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Bennett, would you be willing to come with me to the private office?" Marcus glanced at Lily first. Her eyes were red now, but she stood straighter than before. "Only if Miss Parker is not punished for trying to follow procedure," he said. The lobby seemed to exhale around him. Lily pressed one hand over her mouth. Eleanor's expression softened. "She will not be punished. She will be commended." Marcus nodded once, as if that answer mattered more than the check. Then he picked up the cream envelope, but left the torn pieces on the counter for the record. As Eleanor guided him toward the glass hallway, Bradley stood beside the teller line with his badge still clipped to his jacket and nothing behind it. Marcus passed him without anger. He did not stop. He did not look him over. He simply said, "A person is more than the work you see them doing." Bradley's eyes lowered for the first time that morning, and the polished floor reflected him clearly. The private office at the end of the glass hallway was quiet in a way the lobby had never been. Outside, voices returned slowly, phones were lowered, customers stepped back into line, and the machinery of the bank began moving again, but behind the closed door, time seemed to sit still. Eleanor placed Arthur Caldwell's letter on the desk between them and stood for a moment with both hands resting on the polished wood. Marcus remained near the chair until she nodded for him to sit. Even then, he sat carefully, as if the room belonged to someone else, and he did not want to leave a mark. Through the window, Chicago looked washed and gray, the March rain tracing thin lines down the glass. Eleanor called the Caldwell estate attorney herself. Her voice stayed measured as she confirmed the check number, the amount, the personal directive, and the replacement process. When she hung up, she did not speak immediately. She looked at Marcus the way people look at a family photograph after realizing they have missed someone standing in the background for years. "Mr. Bennett," she said softly, "my father owed you more than money." Marcus folded his hands in his lap. "He owed me nothing, ma'am. He made it out alive. That was enough." Eleanor's eyes shone, but her voice held. It was not enough for him. She opened a drawer and took out a small leather folder. Inside was a second document, signed before witnesses, naming the gift not as charity, not as compensation, but as a promise fulfilled. Beneath it, Arthur had added one handwritten sentence: "Let this man be seen." Marcus read it once, then looked away toward the rain. For 17 years, he had cleaned the lobby beneath Arthur's name. For longer than that, he had carried the memory of a smoke-filled stairwell, a stranger's weight on his shoulder, and a choice that had never felt heroic to him. It had only felt necessary. By noon, the damaged check had been sealed in an evidence sleeve, the replacement had been authorized, and Bradley's office door had been cleared of his nameplate. Lily Parker remained at her station, still shaken, but when Marcus passed her window, she stood and said, "Thank you for speaking up." Marcus gave her a small smile. "Thank you for almost doing the right thing when it was hard." She nodded, understanding the kindness inside the word almost. 3 weeks later, a new brass plaque appeared beside the entrance, lower than Arthur Caldwell's, but polished with the same care Marcus had once given every morning. It read the Marcus Bennett Promise Fund, supporting working families, night students, and employees too often overlooked. Eleanor had asked him to attend the dedication. Marcus came in his gray uniform, not because he had to clean that day, but because he was no longer ashamed of what people had failed to respect. Bradley stood at the back of the crowd, invited only as part of the formal review process, his face quieter than anyone remembered. When the applause faded, he approached Marcus and said, "I was wrong." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then he answered, "Now make sure you are different." He did not offer more. He did not need to. That evening, Marcus stepped out of the bank into clean, rain-scented air, the restored check folded safely inside his coat, Arthur's letter beside it. The glass doors closed behind him with a soft hush. Inside, the marble floor held the last light of the day, bright and still, as if justice had finally learned how to be quiet.